We are going to get started. Some pretty big news on the Julian Assange front. Julian Assange is set to speak out for the first time since being released from Belmarsh prison. So Kevin Gostola, who has been following every development of this case for years now, Assange to testify on political imprisonment for engaging in journalism. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange will travel to Strasbourg, France, and testify before the Council of Europe's Committee on Legal Affairs and Human Rights on October 1st, so very soon. It will be his first public testimony since he was arrested and expelled from Ecuador's London embassy in 2019. The committee is part of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, an international body that is made up of parliamentarians from each European Union member state. Assange will contribute testimony on the political nature of the United States government's prosecution against him, which ended in a plea agreement in June. Consideration of Assange's political imprisonment is part of a wider examination by the Assembly of the increased threats to journalists and whistleblowers in Europe, and it was initiated while Assange was still detained at Belmarsh. On May 13th and 14th, poor Hildur Suna Avarstatir, that is probably the hardest name in the history of this show to read correctly.
And that is saying something.
Yeah, and that is saying something. And this is just the slides are presented as written. I thought maybe there was an error because the full name appears later in the article. This just gives the last name up here. Traveled to the UK to visit Assange in His Majesty's prison in Belmarsh. She talked with Assange for 2 hours and also met with his wife Stella, his solicitor Gareth Pearce, David Morris, who was the chair of the UK delegation to the Assembly, and Jeremy Corbyn, a member of the Assembly. She met with several former UN officials, lawyers, journalists, psychiatrists, human rights defenders, and civil society representatives too. Even though the UK Home Office was the office that approved the extradition request against Assange, the office declined to make a representative available for a meeting with Avarstatir. Avarstatir, the general rapporteur for political prisoners and an Icelandic parliamentarian who serves on the Committee on Legal Affairs and Human Rights, compiled a report on Assange. It concluded that he meets the Assembly's definition of a political prisoner. Quote, Assange's indictment under the Espionage Act for core journalistic activities such as obtaining and publishing information of high public interest is a manifestly disproportionate interference with his freedom of expression, Avarstatir asserted. I further believe that his prosecution in the United States and resulting lengthy detention in the United Kingdom were motivated by the intention to hide governmental wrongdoings and dissuade others from following Mr. Assange's lead. A draft resolution calls out the United States government for misusing the 1917 Espionage Act to prosecute Assange. It states that the charges pursued against Assange caused a dangerous chilling effect, dissuading publishers, journalists, and whistleblowers from reporting on governmental misconduct, thus severely undermining freedom of expression and opening room for further abuse by state authorities. We'll pause there for a moment because that precedent, despite the fact that we're all grateful that Julian Assange is home with his family, that precedent still stands because he took a plea deal. They did not drop the case and basically admit that this was out of bounds and they shouldn't do this anymore. They basically got him to take a plea. They basically showed mercy in a campaign season so that he wouldn't die in prison, right. Which we're all very grateful for. Don't get me wrong. And the activists who worked on this case for years should be very proud of that because they might not have even gotten that if they didn't make it clear that the optics of actually torturing this man to death would be very bad in a campaign year. So I'm not trying to dismiss or poo-poo the win that is his release, but that precedence still stands. The dangerous chilling effect, as quoted here, still stands. Anything before we go on?
No, go on.
Okay. It is recommended that the U.S. government reform the Espionage Act and make its application conditional to the presence of a malicious intent to harm the national security of the United States or to aid a foreign power, and exclude the application of the Espionage Act to publishers, journalists, and whistleblowers who disclose classified information with the intent to raise public awareness and inform on serious crimes such as murder, torture, corruption, or illegal surveillance. Additionally, the proposed resolution urges the U.S. government to investigate the alleged war crimes and human rights violations disclosed by WikiLeaks. Yeah, that would be nice. And Mr. Assange, holding those responsible to account and tackling a culture of impunity towards state agents or those acting at their behest. It demands that U.S. officials cooperate in good faith with the Spanish judicial authorities who are investigating the surveillance operation that was conducted against Assange, his family, and his legal team while he was living under political asylum in the embassy. Over the objection of Richard Keane, a Conservative Party politician in the UK Parliament, the draft resolution expresses dismay about the fact that the UK, a member state, aggravated the political persecution that Assange endured by ignoring evidence of torture and abuse. The authorities of the UK failed to effectively protect Mr. Assange's freedom of expression and right to liberty, exposing him to lengthy detention in a high security prison despite the political nature of the most severe charges against him, according to the draft resolution. His detention with a view to extradition far exceeded the reasonable length acceptable for that purpose. In particular, Avar challenged an aspect of the plea agreement that criminalized Assange for publishing raw, classified documents. Over 13 years have passed since the publication of the unredacted materials, and no evidence has been produced showing that WikiLeaks' publications have harmed anyone, Avar declared. The plea agreement itself clearly states that as of the date of the plea agreement, the United States has not identified any victim qualifying for individual restitution and thus is not requesting an order of restitution. I find it paradoxical that while Mr. Assange revealed thousands of actually confirmed and previously unreported deaths at the hands of the U.S. and coalition forces in Iraq and Afghanistan, he was the one to be accused of putting multiple lives at risk without any evidence of that claim being presented. So, it was a question on our minds for a while now since Julian's release. When, if ever, will we hear from him? Because he's obviously been through hell and he's obviously got recovery to do. But this is going to happen very shortly. He's going to fly to France for an October 1st testimony where he will get to testify to his experience as a political prisoner. So I have one word for Julian: Airbus. Airbus.
Yes. Well,
JetBlue, baby.
That, well, I looked into that. Yeah, JetBlue runs flights in Europe, but they're subcontracting it from other companies.
Yeah,
so you're
yeah.
going to wind up on a Boeing anyway. It's not their fleet in Europe. So no, that's not an option. Yeah, it's amazing after what he's been through for years that he's getting back out there this quickly. I'm sure what he has to say about his experience, particularly his detention in the UK, is going to be very embarrassing for the UK because it's pretty clear that what they did to him fit the standards of torture by
Right.
any reasonable measure. And he's going to go and speak about that. Uh, and the UK is going to have to respond. And what can they say? This is a very dangerous time, and this is a point we've been trying to make lately. There are no true champions of speech among our elites. There's one set of elites ginning up one set of cultural grievances and promising to defend you from censorship regarding those. And then there's another set of elites championing another kind of censorship. There are no elites fighting for the rights of journalists to speak. This is why we, as the actual people living under these psychopathic governments and with these psychopathic elite class, we need to not be empowering any of these people. Our strategy needs to be to disempower the ruling class because what? You think if the more intellectual, dark web aligned kind of people are in power, they're not going to shut down someone like Julian Assange if what he reveals is embarrassing to them?
Right. exactly.
They'll
Well, look,
call him woke, and they'll censor him using their power base to do it. They all want to suppress speech. None of the people who are telling you we need to defend Western values. They don't believe that. And after October 7th, we very clearly saw they don't believe that. They're lying to you.
yeah, and don't forget, it was Trump who did this to him. You know, now
Right,
Trump's
right.
defenders will
Which,
say,
which
"Oh,
they,
well,
they
Pompeo
conveniently
did it.
forget.
Pompeo did it. Trump, the buck stops. You're the president. You're the most powerful
Right,
man in the world.
right.
You pick your cabinet first of all, and second of all, you're the executive, right? So that is on you. And the problem with Trump is that for all of the anti-establishment posturing, at the end of the day, I think the problem with him is he's just lazy. He's just too lazy to actually exercise independence
He didn't
over the
pardon
people
him.
around him.
Could have pardoned him. What about
Didn't
that?
pardon him, right?
He knew all about it. He had Tucker Carlson, who he listens to very closely, asking him to pardon him. Didn't go
Right.
over his head. He wasn't ignorant of it. He knew all about it. He didn't do it.
Exactly. Exactly. And so it's great that he gets to speak now. I hope obviously that he starts speaking more. I hope this is a sort of first step to him, going and sort of telling his story far and wide. But we will definitely have more to say about what he says. And look, the other big win of securing that plea deal for him is that we get to hear stories like this. Don't forget the political prisoners that they kill. Not only is it a horrible injustice that they keep them in prison or kill them or keep them in jail until their health, goes. The other real loss of that is that we don't get to hear them. We don't get to hear their
Right,
story of what
right,
happened to them.
right, right.
And now he gets to tell it firsthand because, look, there have been a lot of journalists who have done really great work on this story for years, Kevin being one of them, whose article we just featured. But ultimately, that was a maximum security prison. We don't know the detail. We don't know the details. We know what people have reported to us, and like I said, there are journalists who have done great jobs giving us as much insight as they can, but nobody can tell it like he can because he was there every second of it.
Exactly,
You know,
exactly. And if he really is able to reemerge into the public eye with the powerful voice that he wielded before they silenced him, he's going to be a very dangerous person to have out there speaking against the state. And we'll see what he needs from us, meaning the people. What can we do to support him? Because that he could potentially, if he's really going to go right back at it, he'll be the most powerful and significant anti-censorship voice literally in the world.
Please clap.